You've heard me say this a million times. I'm excited about my next guest because I am. I enjoy people, and I don't know why they want to talk to me. I'm like a human nap. I get it, but Raina Friedman Watts has one of the best podcasts out there, and I love the name of it. First of all, it attracted me was the Better Call Daddy show, and that's wonderful. And the love that you show for your father, is amazing. And the things that you talk about, because you talk about culture, you talk about things that people will talk about, conversation. It could be funny, and then the next moment it could be deep and sad. And we could talk about the last podcast of yours that I listened to as we record this. This won't come out until a couple of days from now, on a Monday. Um, but because that's real life, right? If we're out socially and we're just talking for 5 minutes, we could be laughing, and then something happens, and then we're talking about something really, really deep. But Raina Friedman Watts, how are you doing today, my friend? And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. That is such a warm, beautiful intro. I really appreciate that. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I need to know, and our viewers and our listeners need to know your backstory. I know about the whole Springer thing. We could talk about that, but what got you interested in you, in your personality, and in your inquisitive nature?
From the time I was a kid, I was always interested in the arts. I was always putting on little performances for my grandparents and would get rewarded for that. They had a real affinity for music and the entertainment industry. My grandfather did the lights on Broadway.
Oh, love that.
Yeah. And whereas he himself didn't get into showbiz, he always wanted to. My dad always kind of wanted his own show. And now, with some of the experiences that I've having worked in radio in college and then gone on to the Jerry Springer show that you mentioned, and then from there I went to work in reality TV, I learned a lot of the production elements that lended well to me creating my own podcast and giving my dad his dream and us doing a show together.
So, how is that working with your dad? Now, of course, you're going to love your dad. It's obvious, but from hey, I'm the professional here. Here's what we need to do. How do you keep it organic, but yet you have to kind of move it along so it's entertaining and talk about that process.
Oh man. I've been giving my dad a hard time lately. That's a funny question that you just asked me because God bless my dad, but like he will tell people that we have a podcast like an
Mm.
old school marketer, and in the same sentence be like, I have a podcast and do you want to be on? I'm like, Dad, let me break down
Well,
to you what makes a good guest. It starts with
right,
having a mic and a story.
right, right. Yes, yes, yes. Right,
So God love him. I mean, he
right.
thinks everybody has a story, and everybody does, right? But not
Yes.
everybody knows how to tell their story. Not everybody knows how to tell it on a microphone. Not everybody has a stable internet connection. Not everybody really wants to tell it.
No, it's true. And maybe some people don't want to hear it. Just
Not everybody is healed through it. Not everybody
no.
wants to share aspects. So, one, it's been a great project to work on with my dad, but lately I've been telling him, you stick to just the reactions.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah,
And
you
we've
just
done a couple shows together where people want to interview both me and my dad. And I love that because people ask him questions that I wouldn't think to ask. But, my love of storytelling began when I started working at a radio station in college. And they were like, here's the NPR news wire. You
hmm
pick the stories, you edit them, have some fun with it, drop some music under you, cut it, edit it, all that stuff. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then I would be in the edit booth and I would be getting creative and I would be singing in there and storytelling in there. And from there, I wanted to work in radio actually. So I interviewed at the WN station, WGN in Chicago.
sure. Very
Big,
famous. Very famous people.
big station. We had an alumni contact that got me the interview. I went up there with stars in my eyes and then didn't get the job. So, but
They have the
Jerry
right to make a
Springer,
mistake. They have the right to make a mistake.
thank you. Yes, they made a mistake, their loss, and
Yes.
Jerry Springer was hiring right next door. So that is how I ended up there. Was there was a flyer in the same courtyard
Hmm.
as WGN. They were right across the street from each other at NBC. And I literally just pulled the flyer down, walked across, and got an interview the same day that I was already up there.
For the people who are listening and watching, shy people don't eat. Right
Yeah.
there, right there. You have to listen to that. Don't be afraid of what they're going to say. If you have whatever it is, the inspiration of desperation, whether it's just an overbearing belief in yourself, why not? I'm a big believer in give everybody an opportunity to say no. You'd be surprised at how many people say yes.
The thing is, though, is that I had heard no before, and I actually feel like that prepared me to not fret
Sure.
too bad over the WGN thing. It was like, oh, darn, but oh, what else is over here?
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I auditioned for a youth performing arts school in high school, and I really
mm,
did not want to go to my home school. I had been bullied in middle school after having gone to like a small Jewish private school, kindergarten through fifth grade. And I was like, I need more friends. I got to break out of this. I
mhm.
had one girl in my class for like kindergarten through fifth grade, and she was lovely, but I like wanted more. It was like a boy heavy year.
Right.
And I was like, I need more friends. I want to go to public school. And then I went to public school and they're like, you dress weird. You don't like hook up with guys yet. Like it was like really, eye opening. I was a very sheltered kid. And so I went to public school, really got picked on. And then I auditioned for this youth performing arts school. I didn't know how to read music. I did not have piano lessons. I just went in there and like sang something off the radio. I had a little bit of, raw talent. So
Mhm.
enough where he was like, "Hey, why don't you go learn an art song, take some piano lessons, and learn how to read music and re-audition?" But my dad had to go to bat for me, like, "We'll do all that for her. Please give her another shot." And so
And
that
that's
was
okay. And that's okay.
it was tough though. It kind of I feel like squashed a little something in me, took away a little bit of my confidence. But after my dad kind of went to the head of the music department and went to bat for me. I was like, I'm doing that. I'm
Mhm.
re-auditioning and I'm not going to quit if I get in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. You know, and I say again, I use the word hubris. I've no this with no hubris. I've filmed and put out there two documentaries, and I bring that up only because I was told that when you reach a certain age, nobody wants to see what you have to say. Well, the first one I did was about hockey in Fresno County. Then the other one I did was about fentanyl and how it was just killing people, and that you have these beliefs that people are dying under the bridge downtown somewhere, and they are. But if you watch my documentary, we talk about people who are dying in their bedroom next to their parents because what they think are M30s are full of fentanyl. It's getting delivered to the house like DoorDash, and they're playing Xbox with their friends, and they're passing away. And they're literally parents are walking into their kids' bedrooms, and they're dead. And or happened in Visalia, California. I was doing. I'm jump all over the map. This is what I do. Um, and I'm giving away some Narcan, and we're talking to some people, some good folk, and they share a story with me. Reverse. These two parents thought they were just taking some painkillers, and they didn't get them from some sketchy person somewhere. They got them from a friend who thought it was a good place where they got it from. And the two 8-year-old twins see their parents dead in the bathroom.
Oh no.
It just because these kind of, and so that's what we talked about. And as you know, you want to, like last week, when you spoke to Jamie Cohen about anti-Semitism, you don't want to be over the top, but you got to tell the truth. There's a lot of nuance to what we do, and you do much longer than I am. But you got to tell these stories, and you don't want to exploit the situation because that you lose your audience and you lose your credibility. Like when you guys, I'm jumping all over the map again. When you were talking, you and Jamie were talking about the anti-Semitism. Boy, you really hit it on the head because you didn't have to say what they picked on with you. All you had to say is that you were picked on because the people let them use their mental imagery of what they think that looks like. And then I was
I
like,
also really found it to be interesting that She was willing to talk about dating a Palestinian.
Yeah, which is really, yeah.
And I thought that that was amazing how open she was about that. And,
How about
a
the
lot
fact
of the
that sh
people who got attacked in Israel were peaceniks.
mm,
They wanted
yep,
peace. They
yep,
were living right along, side the border.
because hateful people and drive-by people don't care about anything other than if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
And if it establishes some prejudices that I heard when I was a kid, it feels comfortable. It just feel, and it's unfortunate, but it does. And it's disgusting. We'll we'll touch that. We'll go back there in a minute. But I want to go back to how do you move from Jerry Springer, and you could talk about all that, right, to becoming your own entity and your own creative person. Like, talk about that because
It's
you
taken a
shared
lot.
you shared a lot of terrible things about having to go in these bad places to try to find these stories and talk about
Oh
that.
boy, I was on a Twitter space last night. This is so crazy. And another girl that I worked with from back in the day, like we went to Jamaica together. We
Hmm.
started similarly around the same time. She came into this small Twitter space with me, and I have never heard her share how she got there. And we were just kind of laughing about like everybody who made it to the producer role at Jerry
Hmm.
had issues.
Sure. Oh,
You
I'm
had
sure.
to have gone through some trauma in your own life or known people that experience things like the people that who experience things on Jerry to be there. I mean, I grew up in Kentucky. My father worked at a factory. I even worked at my dad's factory for a summer. I heard these stories. Like,
Hmm.
it did not seem far-fetched to me. And I truthfully feel like the part of why I did well there and went from intern to producer in one season is because just like I'm able to book 400 people on my podcast, I was able to talk to people like it wasn't a big deal what they were sharing
Hmm.
with me. I was able to talk to them in a way where they trusted me, they wanted to meet me, they would open up to me. The hardest part, to be perfectly honest, was, kind of manipulating them and like pitting them against each other. And
Right.
then after the show, like not caring anymore because I had another show to put on.
Yep. Yep.
I had a hard time with that.
Well, because you have a conscience,
Yeah, I
and
definitely do.
and we've all had to do that kind of stuff along the way. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
you just do. That is your job, and it doesn't make it
Exactly.
okay. One day
Yes.
you wake up, you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. That's fine.
I mean,
Everything
if you
for a
worked in
season.
financial services ever, it's the same thing.
Oh, absolutely,
Oh my
absolutely.
God. I did that for a couple of years where I got a life insurance license
Oh
and
yeah.
tried to sell people life insurance that they didn't freaking need and large policies. And I'm like, I'm making my boss all this money and he's sending me to Tony Robbins for making him rich. And I'm feeling
Mm.
like, yeah, I don't really like this.
No, listen. I was never a producer on Jerry Springer, but is it really any different in the '80s? Well, the '90s rather. Um, I'm selling Yellow Pages, and it was like Mad Men. It really was.
Exactly.
We made money hand over fist. You're making close to $200,000 a year with commissions and all this other stuff, and I could say to you, "Oh, you don't want to pay this increase? I'm just going to go right up the street." And you're saying to me, "But Darren, listen, this is the way I support my family, this or that." And you know what? It's not a good thing. You feel like garbage.
Yeah, it did start to wear on me. And honestly, the reason I left the show is because a guest said to me, "How can you live with yourself?"
Yep.
And after working there long enough, you're like, "Oh man, I never really thought about that."
No, yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah.
bringing that to my attention.
No, listen, absolutely. And then after a while, I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so you do other things in sales and this and that. And what do I feel good about? And by the way, it's a very reputable industry. Don't get me wrong. It was,
yeah.
doesn't exist anymore. But you know what I'm saying. When somebody says, when there's a deadline on a Thursday, and they say, "But Darren, my check clears on Thursday night. The money will be in the bank on Friday," and I'm like, "Nothing I can do. You pass the deadline." and that business goes out of business 6 months later, you feel
It's
like crap.
tough.
Because it's not just that business owners, there's employees that work there, it's their families, it's their kids, it's all of that. And it's a heavy burden, whether you want it or not. You just have to understand that these are real people.
And, you asked me kind of how I got to be where I am now. I mean, obviously there's a lot to that story, but, look, I was approached by even the Jerry Springer documentary that came out. And I thought about the fact that now I'm a mom and I've got 4 kids and 3 of them are teenagers. And
Mm-hmm.
I got to interview Jerry a year before he passed. And I got kind of that beautiful closure with him. And
Nice.
was in control of the edit. And that would not have been the case had I decided to be a part of this documentary. And you're a documentarian
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Whoever tells the story is in charge of the narrative.
Oh,
So
100%.
you got to be careful who you let edit you, who you let interview you, what facial
Yes.
expressions you make, what you're willing to answer. And I just didn't want to be a victim.
No, that because you don't know what they're going to do. I
Yeah.
mean, I learned that when I was taking high school television producing, and that they would sit us down and we would, read a poem, and they would chop it up to make it sound like you were making fun of somebody, that kind of thing, just to say this is the power that you have as an editor and as a
Yep.
director, and it's scary, you
I
know?
mean, I worked on multiple reality TV shows and saw that as well. If they need a conflict, they can create one.
Oh yeah.
Especially when you're shooting around the clock. Like I worked on Nanny 911 for 3 seasons. A husband could take a work call and walk out the door and they made it look like he had a fight with his wife.
Right. Because
And
it's sold,
it's
I
sold and they had a storyline that they needed to perpetuate. They had a formula in which the show needed to be. All of
so
these shows become formulaic.
oh yeah, well, absolutely, because it works and people want to see it. And I remember a certain show that would take a home and supposedly a week later make it so what I'm talking about.
Transformed. It's the same
Yes,
thing with the
yes.
nanny 911. These out of control children, and then the nanny comes in and spends an hour with them, and then they're fixed. No,
Look how
a
that
week with
happened.
them,
By the
an
way,
hour.
yep.
But still,
I remember that show very well. We used to watch it all the time. And it's like,
yeah.
well, you'd move this piece of transportation and then like, well, you can't see behind you can't see come on, you know. And so I had a person and family members that were in the house helping build, quote unquote, help build the house, and you see them on film and there's nothing going on. There's not they're not really screwing anything in.
They're
It's
doing the
just
finishing touches. Yeah.
yes. That's, that's all it is. And but and that's okay because it's a television show and people need to understand that. It's
It's
there to make people feel
entertaining.
good.
It's
Yeah.
entertaining. And to be honest, like after I worked as a post-production supervisor for 3 years and worked with all of these editors and worked as a second set of eyes, when they've cut it 3 and 4 and 5 times, they're like, "Hey, can you come see what I'm missing?" So what was interesting is I wasn't an editor when I became a post-production supervisor, but I developed an interest in doing that from the process of managing it.
Mhm.
So I was in charge of supervising the voiceover talent and, all of the editors at night and the color correction and all of these, post-production elements. And then after I worked there for 3 years and I met my husband and got married, I decided to go back to school and take Final Cut Pro. So I
Oh,
took
that's
a couple,
great.
yeah, I took a couple editing classes, loved that. One of my favorite projects was I was like pregnant with my first kid and my husband followed me through the streets of San Francisco. And this is like early content creation.
Yep.
I had a friend that was teaching a class. She was a teacher. And she asked me if I would go up to people on the street and ask them what they thought happiness was.
Mhm.
So I asked one of my neighbors, and she was like a intellectual type, and her husband worked for NASA. I went up to a Mormon dentist of mine, a guy leaving a synagogue. I ended up meeting a woman on the street. She was an opera singer. She said, "Happiness is singing." And then she like belted out in the middle of downtown San
Right.
Francisco. San Francisco is a great place to do a man on the street. You're
Oh,
always going to find
100%.
characters.
100%. Love San Francisco. Used to go there all the time when I lived out in Cali. Yeah, love it.
Yeah, so that too just really just sparked something in me. I was like, wow, I could make my own content. And then, after I lived in LA and worked in reality TV, I met my husband on the third season of Nanny 911 online. We ended up getting married, having 3 kids in 5 years. I did that for a bit when my kids were in preschool.
Hmm.
I kind of wanted to inch my way back into working. So it's funny, when I lived in LA, I had interviewed for a post-production supervisor role at Judge Alex.
Hmm.
And Judge Alex started in Texas, and they flew me
Oh,
from
wow.
LA to Texas for the
Nice.
interview. But as a post-production supervisor in LA, it was much more of just managing all of the different aspects of delivery.
Hmm.
And the Judge Alex show actually wanted me to take a raw cut and, edit it.
Right.
And I had an overnight to do that. I was like, oh, I'm screwed. They
Yep.
wanted me
Yep.
to take like a remote and a VHS player and time code it out.
You can't do that's just it's setting you up for failure.
So
Nope.
I was like, oh, okay, I'm totally not getting this job. So I like went out with an aunt and uncle for dinner. I
Yeah.
attempted it
Of
obviously,
course,
but
yeah. Got to
I
make it
had
look
never
good.
done that. So, um, again, it was like another seed planted of okay, like as a post-production supervisor, I might need to be an editor too.
Right.
And so when I ended up getting pregnant with my first kid, I went back to school and kind of furthered some of my skills. And I believe that my career has really been kind of, obviously a progression of kind of what do you like doing, what do you not like doing, and continuing to lean into the things that I'm good at and outsourcing the things I don't want to do.
And you know what? I love hearing that because, again, it's just my opinion, but you mentioned the word outsourcing. People, you need to just, again, advice. You just need to have enough confidence in yourself to say, you know what? I don't want to do this, or I'm not really good at this. I am going to have people around me who can do this and help facilitate your vision. Because if you're doing everything, you're not a leader of anything, and you're just going to burn yourself out.
A
You
hundred
have to
percent.
share your vision.
And also what I've learned too, I was just a part of like a podcaster panel last week, and from speaking on a panel, it's crazy. I had like podcasters who wanted to collaborate with me and people who
Mhm.
now like want me to help manage their podcast. And I got asked to speak at another event. So, what I have also realized in the podcasting community is the more creators and creatives that you collaborate with, there's
Yep.
so much room for opportunity there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And just to learn from each other because,
Share resources, be generous. I
oh,
mean, the
please,
more generous
absolutely.
you are, oh my God, it might not come back from that person, but it comes back around tenfold.
Oh, absolutely. And, I see and heard some of the guests that you've had just incredible. Not name dropping, but I had somebody who created this movie that people know and a couple of sequels that came out, and that's going to be another one. And I got a call from him one time, and I was shocked it was actually him. And I'll tell you who it is offline but he goes, "Yeah, I heard you want me to do your podcast." And granted, my numbers don't blow other people's way, and I said, "Well, thank you so much. How busy?" And absolutely yes, and this and that. And I said, why'd you call me? Like, like there was an email he called. He said, not like, oh, you had the gumption to call me. He said, but just why not? You took the time to ask me, and I'm going to do it. And this person, by the way, I'll give you a little hint, from Kentucky.
Is it sports related?
No movies.
Tom Cruise?
Nope. Nope. Think horror films. Big hint right there, kids.
Now you got to tell me.
Do I?
I'm gonna have to figure it out, I guess, and get
Hmm.
back to you.
Your final destination might be the final answer. How about that? I might have just given you the name of the movie he made.
I don't know who did Final Destination.
There's a thing called Google. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
It's from Kentucky. Um,
interesting.
yeah. So
I
anyway,
mean, that's huge though. That's great.
no, but and then but what I'm saying is just be yourself, right? Be out there and don't be
Yeah.
shy with your inquisitiveness. Don't be shy with your talents. So,
I
you
mean,
know,
I felt the exact same way, let me tell you, when Hunter Biden's ex, her
mm,
publicist, reached out to me. I thought maybe she
wow,
had mistaken my show for Call Her Daddy because people do
right.
that. I was like,
My daughter thought that that's what I was like. No, no.
I actually get that a lot. I'm like, thank you, Call Her Daddy. I'm probably getting your like runoff traffic. But and two, you just never know like if celebrities are gonna share your
Hmm.
episode even.
Oh,
They
no
might
doubt.
agree to be on, but they definitely don't like have to share it.
No.
And she did, and that one daily is still getting lots of hits. But I read her entire memoir. I really did my research on her. I listened to her on 3 or 4 other podcasts
Mhm.
in its entirety. And that's the thing too, even when I interviewed Jerry Springer, I listened to him speaking at colleges. I got back in touch with people that I worked with at the show 20 years prior. I really wanted it to be a personal interview where I took him back to the time that we spent together and I knew
But
things about him that other people did not know.
don't you love that? And
Yes,
he probably loved it too because you also didn't do it as a gotcha. Just as a
exactly. And with her either. I
right. Oh,
actually was
wonderful.
like, I even said to her, I was like, you've done some big interviews. Were you nervous? She was like, yeah, I really was. I was like, well, you don't have to be nervous here.
Right, right. It's no nervousness here. I
And
love that.
that makes, I feel like a huge difference too. Like
Mhm.
how you warmed up our conversation right before we hopped on here.
Mhm, mhm.
It puts somebody in a different state.
Yep, and it has to be organic.
Yes,
You
it
know.
really does. Versus like turning on the recording,
Yep.
hitting record and be like, so tell me about yourself.
Yep. No. It's a simple thing like just getting to know each other. Or what would you like to talk about? Those kind of things.
Yeah.
It's important. I remember one time, and again, we share these stories. I'm sure podcasters talk about it all the time. And there was somebody, former NFL player, starting quarterback, and he was very, very nice, very understanding about some of the addiction stuff we did. And he said, "Listen, I can only give you 15 minutes." Well, an hour and 20 minutes later, he goes, "I'm just enjoying the conversation because we just have a conversation like we are now." And that wasn't because of me, that was because of him. But he felt there's a trust there, that there's no gotcha, there's no this or that, just organic conversation, you know?
That's the same thing with Springer. I was only supposed to get 20 minutes. Actually, it's interesting that you brought that up because a lot of celebrities will give you 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And when
Hmm.
I looked up and he gave me an hour, I felt like that was the biggest gift. I felt like it was a gift from God. I said that to myself like after the interview. I was like,
Hmm.
"Thank you for that. Like really
Yep.
thank you."
Oh
I
yeah.
and then everything after that is just like bonus material. You're like,
Oh yeah. That's great. That
it
is great.
was. It was. And now people are like, so who's your, dream guest now? I'm like, dude, every single guest that I have on, I learn
Mm.
something from and I'm getting better from. So I
Oh,
always say like my best episode is the most recent one I released because
mhm.
I am getting better each time I do it.
Absolutely. Oh, by the way, Jeffrey Reddick,
I don't know who that is.
he produced Final Destination, director, created it.
That's a crazy movie though.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a
Very good
big
guy.
Hollywood feature.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And just shocked the heck out of me when I picked up the phone.
I
Yeah.
love it. There's
Yep.
a few that I've tried and gotten no's from, but I'm like, you know what? No is just maybe later I didn't ask in the right way.
Yeah, remember, no, N-O, it only happens because they don't K-N-O-W. They don't know. So just keep giving them a reason as to why and be open and graceful. And when it's ready, they'll
I
do it.
talk to them like they're normal people. It's funny.
Yep.
I love Roseanne Barr. Me and my husband went and saw her live, and she says really funny things about her dad. Like, one time her dad tried to stick up for like her and her brother or something, and then I think he got beat up himself. I'm like, at least he tried.
That's
I'm
right.
like, I had a bully. I always wanted my dad to try. He says he tried. I think he's remembering differently. So, I make comments to her, like I voice text her. And one time I was like, Roseanne,
How great is this? I love hearing this. Go
I
ahead.
was like, one time I listened to her podcast and I was like,
Mhm.
Roseanne, you should have titled it this. And I was like, and also I gave her the time code. I was like, at this this would have made a great clip. And then the next
Right.
day, she took my suggestion and turned it into a clip. I was
I
like,
love
I
that.
feel seen. I shared it. I didn't even say like I gave her the time code, but I was
Right.
like, I feel seen. And then she
Yes.
shared it.
That's true. That's great.
If
That,
you're sharing their content and you like what they're putting out there and
yep.
you make a comment that's personal, that is a great way to get a hold of a celebrity. Katie Couric, I went to her event in Chicago live with my husband. We got
Mhm.
VIP tickets. Honestly, the VIP started like during Shabbos, but I was like, I'll get there at least to hear her speak. So we bought the tickets. I couldn't make it for the VIP, but I took a lot of pictures from the
Mhm.
audience and kind of quoted her. And she saw that I was there. So she follows me now.
How great is that? But see, how great is that?
That's
Yeah.
enough for me. I feel seen just from that. And I read her book and I know that she's a
Hmm.
daddy's girl. And the reason that she became a reporter was, because her dad was in the industry too.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
I thought, since I have a podcast with my dad, that she might, as a daddy's girl, want to tell that story. But if not, that's fine.
Well,
It's cool if she follows me.
let's go there a little bit. What made you want to do your podcast with your dad and give an homage, which I love, which is what attracted me to what you do, to storytelling, which I think is still an underappreciated asset to the human race.
It definitely is. So, what made me want to do a podcast with my dad is that truthfully, he's been my biggest supporter. Like, when I was working and in entrepreneurship, I worked for this big podcaster, Kathy Heller, and helped her put on a 350-person event in LA. And I was pregnant after a miscarriage, and my dad was in LA for business, and he extended his trip and was like, I will be your production assistant. I will help you set up the tables. I will put out the food. I
How
don't
great
need to
is
get
that?
paid. You're not picking up anything. And he's my right hand. And, same thing I mentioned earlier when I wanted to go to that music school and I got rejected the first time. He was like, oh, heck no. Let me talk to the head of the music department. Let's have a little heart to heart here. He doesn't know like you're an outside horse and that you finish in the front. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
I love that.
So
I love that.
that's a
Yeah.
Kentucky reference for you.
Yes, but very much so. Can I share my Kentucky story with you?
Tell me. Yeah.
Okay, so my Kentucky story is not a great story, but to me, it's wonderfully funny. So I'm going to Cincinnati for the first time in my life, and this is when I was involved in Yellow Pages and I'm managing and such. And so I have this wonderful skill of falling asleep on planes. So this is absolute true story. So I leave out of Newark, New Jersey. I was living in New York at the time, and I hear Final Destination. Is that we land? I look up and they say, "Welcome to Kentucky." And let's put it this way, I just had a moment of panic, sheer panic. And one of the flight attendants was, "No, Cincinnati Airport is in Kentucky." And I didn't realize that. What is that?
Oh, yeah. I've flown into that airport.
Yeah, I scared the hell out of me. I thought
Hey,
I,
Jerry Springer probably has flown into that airport. He had a radio show out of Cincinnati. Cincinnati
right.
is where he was mayor.
Yep.
The town still really was crazy about him. And he had his own podcast, I think, for like 7 years or something, where he was probably flying into that airport.
Now, speaking of Cincinnati and such, since we're there, I'm all over the map again. Skyline chili, overrated, underrated? What do you think? Have you ever had it?
I actually have never had it, but I've seen it.
Yeah.
So I guess
I,
underrated.
I passed by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, but whenever I travel internationally and I'm like, I'm from Kentucky, I'm like, like Kentucky Fried Chicken. And
Yeah.
then people will know. Like,
Yes. Yes.
it's more the chicken, I feel like.
Yes. That no, that is true. That is
Or the
true.
baseball bats. I have a couple
Yes.
Louisville Sluggers,
Yes.
the
And,
Kentucky
and
Derby, those
Kentucky
things.
Derby, Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
Just saying.
Muhammad Ali was a big deal for Louisville. In fact,
Oh
the youth
yeah.
performing arts school that I attended, we sang at his house.
Oh, that had to be great. What was that like?
Crazy. I mean, yeah, he was a legend, a hometown hero.
Oh yeah. By the way, the greatest of all time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when he passed away, the streets of Louisville were full.
Yes. Well, he was just an icon. He was, I was watching an old clip on TikTok the other day. It's funny that now we're talking about Muhammad Ali and Jerry Lewis from his old show in the late 60s, well, who big fan of, a huge fan, was talking about how Muhammad Ali was sort of like the P.T. Barnum, and he meant that in the most complimentary way because he could put on a show and captivate people, and he was wonderful. And Muhammad Ali took it very well. He understood what he was trying to say. That yes, everything's a show and it's real and it's authentic. Which actually, my next question: how do you clock being authentic but making it entertaining? And I loved your text message earlier today. How do you balance your social life and your public life and your private life on social media?
It's a tough balance. It truly is. And I don't think that everyone is comfortable blending the two because one question that has come to me often is, should I have a separate brand professionally versus personally? I think for me, it's a mix. Like I definitely blend the two.
Mm-hmm.
But not every company, even that you work at, is okay with that. I had a
Oh,
financial advisor friend in town. She was a former actress turned financial advisor, and she works for a major firm. And she wanted to tell her personal story, and they said absolutely not. And it's funny too. I'm a Purdue grad, and I saw even
yes.
in a newsletter.
Boilermaker kids, Boilermaker.
It
Yes.
was a great school, but I have
Mm.
to say, I saw in a publication, an alumni newsletter or something, that they were looking to feature women podcasters who are alumni. And I wrote to them and was like, hey, I've got over 400 episodes.
Yep.
And they were like, oh, your title says safe space for controversy. We got to stay away from controversy.
How terrible is that?
I was like, well,
That
thanks
is
for letting me
terrible.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually was a bit offended by
You
that. But you
should
know
be.
what?
That's terrible.
That's the times that we're in. So how do I balance it? I don't think I share everything online, but the things that I do share, I'm pretty open
Hmm.
about, you know?
Well, that's good. And you set in my opinion, you meaning the general you, we set the narrative, don't we? Like, this is what I'm comfortable with,
Hmm.
and I can talk about this. And not everything in my life will be public,
Yeah.
but this is who I am, and that's it,
The
and
thing that's gotten me in trouble is like talking about other people. So I try to only tell my version of the story. And I think that
right.
this is even a good lesson to other people
Hmm.
because I've seen other podcasters who have had to take down episodes because of this.
Oh, yeah.
If you
Oh,
are interviewing somebody that's going through a divorce and they badmouth the other person and say that person's name,
hmm.
the other person could get an attorney and say cease and desist and take that down.
Yep. And if you're smart, you will, because,
Exactly. So my intention in putting out a podcast is not like you said, it's not a got me or
hmm,
got you.
hmm,
my podcast is, talking about interesting and controversial things and getting my dad's intergenerational take on it. If there is still healing that needs to be done around whatever we're talking about, don't share that part.
No,
You
no,
know
it's
what I
true.
mean?
It's true. You know,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I like before we get into some fun stuff and wrap up, I'd like to talk a little bit about your most recent podcast and the talk about anti-Semitism, um, because I think this is a great country, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are very anti-Semitic.
Oh, I am honestly shocked by the times that we're in. The college campuses over the last year, as a mom to 4 children, I don't even know if I wanna send my kids to college.
I get it. I get that.
Yeah, I feel like what has invaded our education system, that's truthfully even why I send to to private school.
I heard you do that, and I love that you do.
Yeah,
Um, and I say that with the no hate to it. Listen, my master's degree is in education. I graduated cum
interesting.
laude. And if you know who Sir Ken Robinson, he passed away a couple years ago. I'm a big believer in that approach to education, not this, here's what you have to think and not explain it and no nuance or anything else like that. Um, yeah, it's terrible times we live in. You know, I if you go into my social media, and I don't look for a pat on my back here, but y I don't know how old you are. I don't want to know, but I can tell you that.
45.
Well, there you go. All right, all right. So you're a child, and I say that in the most loving way. I'm going to be 60, so um, I have been very fortunate in my life that we both you're at that age too. We knew people who had family members who died in the Holocaust. We knew people who survived the Holocaust.
Yes.
I learned, I'm sorry if I get emotional, I learned about the Holocaust from a gentleman named Henry who owned a luncheonette. And when people turned about 9 or 10 years old, he'd give you a free lime bricky or some sort of, something like an egg cream, which, by the way, kids, no eggs in egg cream, but they're delicious. Um, and he would tell a story and he'd show the numbers on his arm and how there was a man with a white glove who was going to put him in with his sister and his mother who were killed. And at the last minute said, "You look like you could work." And that saved him. So I learned about the Holocaust from that man. I was blessed to live in a very diverse, very forward leaning um, area of Brooklyn, and so it was this wonderful mishmash of, you know, Jewish, Catholic, you know, Irish, Italian, Slavic, and Russian. It was wonderful. And I feel blessed for that. And so many people, unfortunately, live in these silos. And I try to understand things from their point of view. And when you live in a silo, you have no windows and no clean air comes in, no air comes in. You don't see other people. And, you know, you don't ask why. Like, we mentioned about the tassels last week, right? And I remember, like it was yesterday, saying, "Why do you wear that?" And here's a strange thing: you got a nice answer, and then you got the, "Hey, thank you for asking." And you learn, and you're like, "This is cool." This is, you know, my dad's best friend. My dad's best friend was a rabbi, and
Wow.
oh yeah, he was a rabbi, and he had 8 children, and he lived on 32nd Street in Brooklyn. And he was a big Mets fan. So my dad and him, um, what's the terminology? I forget we would use. My dad would run in and put the TV on for him. I'd put the lights on
Oh,
Saturday.
he was a Shabbos goy.
Yeah, yes, yes, yes. So, and my dad wore that with pride. And like, so did I. This was wonderful. But here's the best part. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Mets are on. Okay. My dad would set the TV up, right? So he wasn't looking at you, but he could see it or hear it, because our windows, and it was, the old houses, the little alley. It was just a wonderful way to live. And that people would hate that just disgusts me. I don't understand it. I don't know why people would kill. I don't know why people
Ugh.
hate, but they do.
I have a very hard time with it too. And that's why I think it's so important what you're doing, what I'm doing,
Mhm.
because if we can highlight the good
Yep.
and it makes a ripple effect, it
Oh yeah.
really and truly does. So I would just say I love the stories that you're covering and I
Mhm.
love how you share and how you interview
Same
and
to you.
bring more of that into the world. And that's how you can make a difference.
Well, before you wrap, speaking of some questions, and hopefully you may have one or two, but you ready for my podcast questions?
Yes.
Because I'm going to learn more about you with this rogue question. Well, there's a couple of them. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, kids, buckle up. So you and your friends decide to just binge watch something on Netflix. Doesn't matter what it is. All right. So there's you and three others. This is your tight knit group. This is your posse. Okay. Now, one of them want to invite somebody else that you do know. You know them, but they're not part of your core group. So every once in a while you see them at a party. You know who they are. You feel comfortable with them. No weird vibes, but they're not part of that crow group. Okay. But for whatever reason, you guys decide, let's have some fun. We're going to have some cereal. All right. Just stay with me on this. So you're going to have some cereal. You're just going to relax. Good time. And you notice that this person, this extra person, puts the milk in first before the cereal. This is important. Do you say anything to them? Do you say something to their friend? Or do you
That's
wait and
funny.
see?
I might just mirror what they did just to like make them feel more comfortable. Like, oh, does it taste better like that or something?
Right. So you would bring it up kind of in a funny way. You'd create some
Probably, yeah.
you'd create floaters for whatever reason, you know.
And I'm
But you
picturing like the milk and then probably some like nice either Cocoa Pebbles or Cocoa Krispies.
that
That
was
would go
the
in nice.
that was the next question. Yeah, because the water, the milk gets a little chocolatey, but you're making floaters, you know, uh, and
Oh, that's
well,
funny.
yeah, but see, I would eventually have to say something. If I noticed that the person was okay, I would say like, walk me through that protocol.
That is funny. I don't know why that reminds me of like when I was on that Twitter space last night and people call me Renee and Reenie like all the
Mhm.
time. And I'm like, do you say anything? Do you just roll with it? So
Right.
sometimes, yeah, it's like, do you pour in the cereal and just do what they did? Or are you like, hey, man, like, why'd you do that?
Now, have you ever heard of a fry tax?
No.
Okay. So this is another great question. This is we're getting to know Raina, not Reena. Raina. Okay. So somebody says to you, "Hey, Raina, would you pick the group up to some McDonald's?" All right. So you're doing the fly. So you're picking up the food. It is socially acceptable, yes or no, at a red light for you to reach in and take a fry from somebody else. It's a fry tax. Since you had to drive, you're using your gas. That it's okay. That the expectation is that yeah, you're gonna have a few fries that don't belong to you. Yes or no?
Okay, so that's kind of like when you're cooking a Shabbos meal and you need to make sure that the food tastes good for your guests. So yes,
Yes,
I'm taking the fry tax
absolutely.
and the matzo ball taste.
By the way, matzo ball soup is my personal favorite. Love it, love it, love it, love it.
Oh, I love it and make it.
Oh, do you? Excellent.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. It's so good. So good. Um, so the next question is: you go to the movies. You go to the movies. Do you sit first? You go to the concession stand first. And here's the thing: when you get your standard popcorn, your drink, or your whatever, do you take a sip of your drink first, or do you have popcorn first? These are the important questions people want to know.
I think if I'm bringing my kids, they're going to make me go to the concession stand
Right?
first. And I usually eat before I drink.
God, see, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Now, are you a sharer, or is like this is my popcorn? Oh, I'll get your own.
Dude, my dad can eat the entire bucket of
I love your
popcorn
dad. I love your dad. He knows.
himself.
He knows.
And God love him because he's good getting his own basket and then letting you get whatever you want to because he's like, I am claiming this one.
But see, he knows because he's kicking it old school. That's what we do. This is
Exactly. He's
mine.
like, what do you want? This is for me.
Yes. Yes. I don't want your grubby hands in my popcorn. I'm sorry.
He'd be okay if you wanted to take a little bit, but he definitely is like, look, I'm getting this one for me. What do
That's
you
right.
want?
That's right. That's right.
I was more of like liking the chocolate stuff. I love the Raisinets. I used to get those.
Oh wow. Yeah. I always see those. Did they even make those anymore?
I loved those, and then like the snow caps. I'm kind of a
Snow
chocolate
caps.
person.
Oh,
Yeah.
very good. Very, very good. So now here's another question because we're talking about this topic now. Um, do you agree with me? Yes or no? Fun size is not fun. When did Halloween candy become this like inchworm, like this big fun size? It's not fun. There's nothing fun about this candy. Back in the day, it used to be this whole thing.
Oh my God. Back in the day, I would fill up an entire pillowcase
Of course.
full of candy, and I would have to stash it
Hmm.
under my bed or like try to hide it from my dad
Hmm.
because no matter how many Reese cups I stashed, they were in half by like 2 or 3 days later.
Oh yeah. Well, see, because parents, they were smart, and let's face it, I was not. I would have trouble with the two-piece puzzle. They because what's the help me? This whole I gotta check your candy first for like pins. No,
Oh,
they
I
were stealing the
know.
good candy. They were taking they taking the M&Ms, and I was getting stuck with like I don't know, like the
The
knockoff
dots.
Snickers. Yes,
The
the
dots.
dots. Yes, pulling my teeth out. Horrible.
I can't do anything like that anymore.
You won the podcast. Dots.
I can't
Horrible.
do any of the dots or even really
Wax
the
lips.
gummy stuff anymore. Oh God. Or like those sodas that like you have to like bite the wax off to
Why,
get the
yeah.
nasty juice out. I'm like, no.
Why am I doing that? It's like popping a pimple and I'm drinking the pimple. I want no part of that.
Oh my God, no. I keep that away. I mean, my poor 5-year-old, he got cavities like already. None of my older kids did. Like I was better about like brushing all of their teeth, but I'm like, oh no, now I gotta brush
Right.
his every night. Like,
So this is an absolute true story, and then I will turn everything over to you because I know you have a couple questions, maybe. So when we were kids, we had this funny dentist. Guy was hilarious. So one day, my brother had a lot of cavities, and I caught up with him later on. But the dentist one day said, "Hey Tom," because that's his name. They said, "I want to show you something outside." Goes, "You see that Cadillac? You bought me that."
exactly. Oh my God, a cavity is like 1,000 a tooth now.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, speaking of Cadillacs, my grandfather drove them, my
Mm.
father drove them, and they did not fit in Kentucky. I
Oh,
was
I'm
like,
sure.
Dad, come on. You moved from Brooklyn to Kentucky. It's time to get a truck.
Yes. But you know what? I love your dad for having a Cadillac because that's what I had as well.
He loved Cadillacs, my grandfather too. Actually, you kind of remind me a bit of their accent.
Of course, yeah, Brooklyn. Yeah.
Yeah. But you lived on both coasts. How did that
Yeah. So,
happen?
uh, so what happened was I had this wonderful thing that happens in the corporate world. They said, "Hey, Darren, we got this great promotion for you, or we don't need you." So,
Oh yeah.
but it was great because I grew up in Brooklyn. That's where I graduated did my undergraduate work, and was working in the city. And then we bought Transwest Publishing out in California, and they wanted me to go there and consolidate things and kind of start open that up for the telco there. And so they bought my house and they did everything. It was really good. So for 16 years, my wife and I and the kids, we just lived up there. And then now we're back on Cape Cod. That's where I am now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
One of
So
the
I can't.
nannies from Nanny 911 tried to offer me up her place on Cape Cod when we got married. I've still never made it. I've never been
Well,
there.
when you guys one day show you around, it's beautiful.
I hear it's lovely.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, any question for me before I let you go?
Yes. Tell me about the first time you coincidentally were able to see an LA Dodger pitcher named Fernando.
All right. Excellent. Yes. So interesting. So I'll tell you, I'm not saying that I'm old, but back in the day when you'd get an appendix out, it would be like 4 or 5 days in the hospital. So um, I had my appendix taken out, and Joan Hodges, the wife of Gil Hodges, was a friend of my father. Right? We talked about like your dad knew people, and this my dad was a policeman, then a U.S. Marshal, and whatever. So she shows up at my hospital one day and says, "I got a gift for you." And this was the first time that Fernando Valenzuela ever pitched at Shea Stadium.
Oh,
So
wow.
she got me and my dad 2 tickets to sit in the press box to watch the first time him play the Mets. And I will never forget that. She was such a wonderful woman. I was actually very honored recently to talk to her daughter. And, and that was wonderful because we talked about the love a person has for their father and storytelling and such. But yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, that was a phenomenal interview. I loved that. And you even turned it into kind of a documentary piece.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I think she would do better on your show than my show. And let's hope that happens.
Aw.
I think it will. That's all I'll say.
I love how you were saying that her father was such a legend.
Yes, he really was. And he was in the neighborhood because back then they didn't make a lot of money. And I mean, your father to ask your dad, and they lived in the neighborhood. They worked at the local liquor store. They worked at the car shop up the street during the off season. And he was just one of Gil Hodges. He's in the Hall of Fame. He won 2 World Series, and he just lived on Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn.
That's so cool.
Yep.
That's really cool. Tell me something that's like your favorite about your dad.
So my dad was and still is. He passed in 2015, but he's still with me every day.
Aw.
So this is my dad. My dad had to go to downtown NYU hospital for just something like a little skin cancer kind of thing. So I drove him, beautiful day, sunny, beautiful day. I drove him to the thing. And I'm sitting in the waiting room, and he is in the middle of getting his surgery. And all of a sudden, you hear people just murmuring and what's going on. And you look at the television, the radio, the World Trade Centers were hit. So we were a couple blocks away, 20 blocks or whatever it is away. And I remember my dad's in the middle of surgery, and these wonderful doctors still have to do what they have to do. So I go to the roof of NYU Hospital. You're not supposed to go. And I watched the towers burn. So then people are panicking. And here's the thing I'll never forget. We're going to go downstairs to the lobby because it's still working on my dad. What are we going to do, right? And by this time, they thought other things were happening that didn't. And we were afraid. I remember looking at um, the Empire State Building thinking that might be hit next. Um, so I grab a payphone. Remember those?
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, so it was working, and I call my wife, and the phone goes dead. So she thought I died.
Oh, my God.
So I go downstairs to the lobby, and I'll never forget this. The elevator doors open, and there's a young woman, and she's holding a baby. She was bringing her baby home that day.
Wow.
And then, so long story short, my dad, he gets out, and we go downstairs. And he was a U.S. Marshal at the time. He was also a chief warrant officer with the New York State Guard in his 60s. And he knew that he was going to get activated, and he'd still got the bandages on his head. So they let us go, even though the Manhattan was in the lockdown. It was so surreal. We drive through the Brooklyn Queens tunnel, and tanks. and stuff are coming the
Oh
other
my
way. So we
God.
get through there, get my father home because I drove him, and then I go out to Long Island. My dad, same day, puts on his gear because he got activated and went and worked the pile, to look for bodies, to look for whatever. And everybody that was in his unit died of cancer.
No.
Yep. And I remember my dad, you talk about being a hero or whatever. He didn't wear it as a badge of courage, but he goes, why not me? Why
Oh
not
my
me? What makes me
God.
more special than anybody, those firemen and police officers who passed away? Why not me? And they knew that there was a bunch of asbestos and all that other junk in there. And we're still losing people from that. So my dad he didn't wear it as a badge of honor as much as why not me? When we used to sleep in homeless shelters one night a week, my dad and I, one night a month, I'm sorry. And it was one night a month, I want to be accurate. And we would have these wonderful conversations with these people. There's nobody on this earth, on God's earth, that when they were a baby said, boy, I hope I wake up and I'm homeless one day. I hope I grow up homeless. I want to grow. I want to have a nice childhood. I want to experience a lot of trauma then, and I want to be homeless. I want to become addicted to drugs. No, don't do that. These are real people. These are wonderful people who need help and they need services. So when you're sleeping in a homeless shelter, and it is wonderful to feed, and it is wonderful to provide towels and whatever, but when it's 3:30 in the morning and they have that itch that they want to use, or they have that itch that just whatever, and when you're present, when you're just present, you're sitting with them, and you're not saying what happened to you. Well, you can still put your life together. No, when you're present and you just say to them, "Hey, did you watch the Met game last night? What do you think of the Knicks?" Or, "Hey, this weather, when's it gonna get warm?" And you just treat people with grace, and you're an active listener. You're amazing, amazed what can happen. I learned that from my dad.
That's a phenomenal story. Oh my God. How old were you when he started taking you to do that?
I was about 18 or 19. Yeah.
That really left an impression, my goodness.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
brave thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, thank you. So he when he left the police force, he didn't know what he wanted to do, and he was drinking a little too much. And he told my brother and I, get the guns out of the house. And then I was working as a security guard in Kings Plaza, and the New York City Police Department had this wonderful program for police officers who had alcohol problems. And I'll never forget, I'm not talking out of school because my dad has talked about this. His last 35 years of his life, he was sober and he became a U.S. Marshal and whatever. Um, it's funny. People say that not to lie, but sometimes lying is very good. And I'll tell you why. One of the greatest things I ever did in my life was to tell a lie. Can I share that with you?
Oh my God, yeah.
Okay, so I'm driving him to. My dad had a lot of anxiety, and he used to rub his chest when he was in the thick of his alcoholism. And he was rubbing his chest, and like, all right, take me. I'm going to go to the hospital today. We're going to go. And so I'm driving him, and we get, I don't know, 10 minutes away. And he's like, Darren, we got to turn back. I'll go tomorrow. We almost made it. We'll go tomorrow. We'll go tomorrow. I'm like, Dad, you almost made it. Let's just do it. We're here. We're here. And I'm driving, and my dad loved me incredibly so.
Aw.
But he looks at me and he punches me right in the face as I'm driving. And I turned to him, and do you know what I saw, Raina? I saw a scared child.
Wow.
He was afraid. And you know what? It didn't hurt at all. He was afraid. It was more like a mush, because he pulled it, and he was just afraid. And I told him, I was like, you're fine. You're going to be good. And so we get to the hospital and we're in the waiting room. And I'll never know the name of the young nurse, and I'll never know the name of the janitor. But in my opinion, they saved my dad's life. Because here's the lie. So we're waiting there and we're waiting for the doctor to come in for the people to get him and put him into, it was at Booth Memorial Hospital in Queens. And they had the program there. And my dad started to really rub his chest. We got to go. And I was afraid he was going to elope and leave. And who knows what would happen. And I don't know if I ever get him back. So, and this is why I looked at it as divine intervention. You got to be open to it. And I look, and literally, like something out of a movie. There's a janitor with a mop, and I said to myself, I went to the nurse. I said, "Can somebody put a white coat on him and pretend to be a doctor?" And no BS, 100% what happened. So she goes, "Yeah, I see what you're saying," and she just bought into it. And we put a white
Wow.
coat on him, and he just went like this to my dad. Hey, yeah, look, I gotta go. Just to keep him enough until I came and I put him away. Took him upstairs. So he takes his wedding ring off. Was remarried, and he says, "I'm really sorry you had to see me like this. I'm so embarrassed." I was like, "I've never been more proud of you than right now." And so everything is nuanced, right? Everything is discernment. If the greatest thing I did for my dad was to lie. I told a
It's so
lie.
sweet that you said, "I'm so proud of you right now."
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's interesting when the relationship flips and your
Yep.
parents need you just as
Hmm.
much as you need them, and
Oh
it
yeah.
seems like it was a moment of that.
Yeah. I can tell you right now, your dad needs you as much as you need him, if not more.
You think?
I know. I know.
I still need him a lot. And it's crazy to say that at 45 years old. I'm like, oh man, I got to stick around a long time. I'm getting on my treadmill so I can stay alive for my 5-year-old.
Well, and that's a good thing. And you know what? Your 5-year-old knows it. Your 5-year-old knows it. Believe it or not, they know it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
he's a chip off the old block too.
so, Rana, before I let you go, tell people how they can find you because you know what? They should. Their lives will be better and they'll have some nice enjoyment and everything else.
Well, you can find me on Twitter, like how we connected,
That's right.
and it's Rena with two E's twice. So Rena.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find me on LinkedIn at Rena Friedman Watts. It's the same thing on Instagram, TikTok, all of the things. And then bettercalldaddy.com. And you can find me at Better Call Daddy on YouTube also.
Love everything about that. And this was wonderful. And thank you so much for your time.
Oh my God. I want to re-air this on my show, can I? And like add
This
my
is
dad's
I'm no
reaction.
I'm going to if you don't mind I'm going to give you the feed
Cool.
and I'm going to send it to you as soon as we're done and do what you want with it and make it yours.
I'm gonna put a Better Call Daddy intro on it, have
Yeah,
my dad react to it, and re-air the whole thing.
100%. It's yours. Bye
Thank
now.
you. You're
Bye.
amazing.
Right back at you. Let's do this again. Bye
I
now.
would love to.
Thank you.
Thank you.